Hello, everybody. I'm Kirk Dieter, and welcome to this episode of Round the Fire on EarthX TV. This is a special day because I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, and frankly, my boss, Chris Wood, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Trout Unlimited. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Kirk. It's good to be here.
Hey, listen, I wanted to talk to you about a lot of things, and it's fun for me. I get to put you on the spot, which is something I've been looking forward to for a long time. I saved this as my last episode to host to go one-on-one with you, but I do want to get into Trout Unlimited, and it's more than just work for both of us. I know that this is a life passion, and as anglers and people who are connected to rivers and lakes and so forth, whether we work for TU or not, the mission is something that's near and dear to both of us. But maybe we could start off and you could tell people a little bit about TU, Trout Unlimited, and how it was founded, how old it is, where it came from, and that sort of stuff.
So you're right, Kirk. This work really, whether you're a professional staff person like you or I, and you're paid, or you're a volunteer, this work is it's not a job, it's a calling. And it has been that way since 1959, when about a dozen anglers on the banks of the AuSable River in Michigan decided to form this entity called Trout Unlimited. And those dozen anglers, they were frustrated that the state of Michigan had been masking habitat degradation of the AuSable and other rivers by producing ever more hatchery fish. And so they wanted to found an organization that was dedicated to the protection of wild and native fish, and the proposition that if you take care of the fish, the fishing will take care of itself, in the famous words of one of our founders, Art Newman.
You know, I can think back, I grew up in the Great Lakes myself, the Great Lakes region, and I was a river rat. I was a creek rat. I remember Mrs. Neely used to have to pull me out of the creek and put me on the back of her bicycle and ride me home so that my mom could throw my clothes on the clothesline. You know, I was always in the water. And I think that a lot of kids today, it's starting to happen more and more. And we're going to get into that in a bit, but people are connected to water and fresh water and need clean water, which is our business, more and more and more, and whether they're hardcore anglers or not. So while the name Trout Unlimited certainly implies trout fishing, and that's our roots, and that's important to us, you don't necessarily have to be a hardcore angler to benefit from the work that TU does, do you?
Yeah, that's right, Kirk. So if you think about it, we do three basic things when it comes to our mission at Trout Unlimited. We protect the sources of the coldest, cleanest water. We help to reconnect those protected areas down to places downstream so that fish can move in response to floods and fires and drought. And then we do restoration along the valley bottoms, where historically we had the most biologically productive part of the landscape. Protecting, reconnecting, and restoring river systems, there is no question it makes fishing better. There's just absolutely no question about it. It also helps to make those landscapes more resilient, though, to the effects of a changing climate, right? It also, by protecting those headwater streams, you're also reducing downstream water filtration costs for local communities. By reconnecting rivers to floodplains and allowing them to breathe, you're dissipating the energy of the flood as it rockets downstream toward a community. And by doing that, watershed scale restoration, you're creating, in our case, thousands of family wage, good paying jobs in largely rural communities all across the country. So whether you trout fish or not, it doesn't matter. The work that TU does around the nation is good for fishing. It's good for building natural resilience in response to a changing climate, and it's good for communities all around the country.
Yeah, and I think that the moment that we're in as a country, this pandemic has caused a lot of hardship and sorrow and terrible things. But one thing it has done is it's, with the movie theaters closed and the malls closed and the T-ball leagues shut down last summer and so forth, where did people go? They went to water. They went to lakes and rivers and oceans, but they found water as a source of recreation. And it's actually astounding. RBFF, the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation, recently sent out a report that said as many as 17 million people either connected with for the very first time or reconnected with water. It's almost like we're living in a a brave new world. And TU is right in the middle of that mix right now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've seen it even at TU. We saw our membership increase over the past year by, 10, 11, 12%. It's funny, down back behind me, you'll see a part of a red rowboat, and that comes from a place called Fletcher's Boathouse, which is right up the river and the Potomac. It's a boat livery. It's been there for 100 and something years. 3 or 4 generations of the Fletchers owned it. It's now a Park Service concession. It's run by a Park Service concessionaire. But Ray Fletcher once told me years and years ago when I first got to DC, he said, "You know what, Chris? Eventually, everybody comes down to the river." And that's what we're seeing now. All of the excuses to not go down to the river are gone, right? Baseball, my kids haven't had baseball. They don't have swimming. They don't have tennis. They don't have basketball. But what can they do? Well, they can fish. They can go down to the river and be that river rat that you were talking about. And it's happening all over the country right now. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity to not just build the membership roles of Trout Unlimited, but to, create ever more conservation advocates by people having this tangible, visceral connection to water in a way that we just haven't seen in the span of, I don't want to go too far on this one, Kirk, but in the span of a generation, America has gone from 60% of us growing up in rural areas to 80% of us living in urban areas. And there is a consequence of that in terms of people becoming disconnected from the lands and waters that actually sustain our nation. And this pandemic has helped to reconnect and reknit that tangible connection that people have by bringing them down to the river.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. And one of the things that interests me the most from that report that I referenced from RBFF is that over 90% of the people who found water have indicated that they want to stay on the water. They want to maintain that connection. So I don't think you saw a flash in the pan. I don't think that. I think the worm has turned. I think that the paradigm has shifted. All those cliches, I think they apply. I think we're living in a brave new world, and water's at the center of that. So,
amen. Amen.
So another thing the pandemic did, at least for me, I've been very lucky throughout my career to go and travel and write about fishing in faraway places like Australia and Russia. It's been great. But this has been one of my most favorite summers fishing wise, because I connected with my home water.
Yeah.
I hiked into places. I was a young man again doing these things that meant so much to me. And I think that a lot of people feel the same way. And that's another aspect of TU. Not to be such a cheerleader for TU, but I'm a cheerleader for TU because of this. We have people who are hyper local focused, who are taking care of the rivers in their backyards, and yet we're all part of a mosaic that comes together on a national scale. So on the one hand, it's hyper local. It's right down to the stream that runs through the little town out in the middle of Wyoming, to a national effort that manifests itself on Capitol Hill. And I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit as well.
Yeah, and I want to come back in a minute though to my experience this year getting hyper local, actually not through fishing, but through hunting. But you're absolutely right. I think that's the secret sauce of TU, is that we have tens of thousands of local advocates, people who they live, love, and they fish on their home waters, and they know those waters like the back of their hands. And there is no one. It's an adage, but it's true, to say that conservation that is most local is most durable. It's 1,000% true, because those are the places they love and they live and they fish. And so what we do though is we take that passion and we harness it and we aggregate it so that it can be directed at, say, the state capitol, if there's a water bond that's coming through, or we'll just take that general passion that these anglers have for the place, their home waters, and we'll use it and target it elsewhere. So whether you're meeting with the town commissioner to try to explain why it's a bad idea to dump salt right by that blue ribbon trout stream that you like to fish, or you're a local angler from Pennsylvania who chooses to write then President Trump a letter asking him to protect Bristol Bay, we have this unique ability to take the passion that people have for these specific places and redirect it where their passion can do the most good. And that, I think, is what makes us so effective as an organization.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to go to the meetings. You don't necessarily have to, it's a new TU. We're charting a new course as far as how people can be a part of this community and how they can make their home waters better and how they can be part of the national mosaic that's in favor of clean water and all that stuff. Maybe, looking forward, it's in other words, it's not my father's TU anymore, is it?
That's right. No, that's exactly right. So look, every month our chapters meet, wherever they meet. More and more often now it's at microgrews, but or Kiwanis clubs or wherever there's a meeting place that they can get a hold of. But part of what we've learned is that we have a tremendous amount of engagement in thousands of communities around the country from people who aren't TU members, but they show up for a stream cleanup, or they show up for a community science project where you can help, assess the health of your local waterway, or they'll show up for a tree planting, or they'll show up to help teach kids to fish, or to learn to fish, or to teach veterans to fish, or a whole host of things they show up for. They're not part of TU, but they are giving back. They are contributing back to the places that we really care about. And so part of what we're doing now is we're building a brand new membership model that's based on engagement. The model that we have right now is based on you send us a $35 check and we'll send you a hat and a box of flies and you become a member, and maybe 5 or 10% of those members show up at one of those local meetings I mentioned. But there's another an order of magnitude more people who are intersecting with our organization and making the places they live better. And we are welcoming those people into the organization. Whether they ever lift up a fly rod or not is not important. The fact that they want to give back to the places they live, they love, and they fish is what really matters. And that is the new TU. That is the paradigm shift, to use your phrase, from your father's TU to this TU.
So let's talk about how we swing the big stick every once in a while. We've got some wins lately. We've had wins all along, but it seems like there's been great momentum in the last several years. Congratulations on your leadership, and I'm proud to say that. But maybe you could talk to us about Pebble Mine. Let's start there.
Yeah, so Pebble Mine, it was a mine that was proposed in this little corner of Southwest Alaska in a place called Bristol Bay. And so Bristol Bay has 7 rivers that drain off the hills around it and into this big bay. And in the headwaters of 2 of them, a Canadian mining company wanted to build a massive open pit copper, gold, and molybdenum mine. And that mine would have required an earthen dam that would have been hundreds of feet high and miles in length. And the purpose of the dam would have been to hold back in perpetuity the toxic tailings that would have been created by this dam. And the 2 rivers that I mentioned that this dam would have sat in this mine would have sat in the headwaters of are the Kvichak and the Nushagak. And every year, the Kvichak River system supplies about half of all of the world's wild sockeye salmon. That's not a Chris Wood fishtail. Nearly half of all the wild sockeye in the world come from this one river system. And the other one, the Nushagak, every year is one of the largest producers of Chinook salmon. There's almost no worse place that a mine could have been proposed than the place that they proposed it in the headwaters of Bristol Bay. And we fought that project for 50. And by the way, the other thing, Kirk, and I know you know this, there's a big lake up there called Lake Iliamna, and giant, not steelhead, but they're steelhead size rainbow trout move out of that lake into the rivers like the Nushagak and the Kvichak and the Naknek and other rivers. And they feed on the salmon eggs or the decaying salmon themselves. And so you have a chance to catch 30+ inch rainbow trout up there. It's probably one of the best native rainbow trout fisheries in the United States. Yeah. And so we fought that mine for 15 years. And by gosh, we were able, through the help of the local Alaska native villages, the places like Igiagig and King Salmon, some of those other Dillingham, other small communities up there, Alaska native villages, our friends at the Bristol Bay Native Corporation, the commercial fishing industry, the outdoor retail industry, everybody got together, and through their help, we were able to convince the Trump administration, their Corps of Engineers, not to grant a very important permit that the proponent needed to build the mine. And now we're working to convince the Biden administration to follow through on their promise to protect the underlying real estate there in perpetuity, so we don't have to deal with any more boneheaded ideas like building a massive open pit mine in the headwaters of the world's most productive salmon fishery.
Yeah, you mentioned the rainbows up there. One of my first stories I ever did. I went to Alaska and fished in king salmon and on the Naknek River it was called early Alaska, and it was before the salmon started running, before the salmon season opened. But the rainbows had come out of the lake and they were eating smolt on the salmon smolt that were washing down toward the ocean, and called the smolt bust. And it's almost like it's almost like a saltwater experience, like a striper bite or something like that.
Yeah.
I taped the 3 or 4 fish that were over 30 inches just in 4 or 5 days of fishing. And it was just blew my mind. And I was immediately connected to the area. And so following this first for Field and Stream magazine and later now with TU, I mean, this has been like a labor of love. And so I couldn't tell you how elated I was when it finally came to pass that this is looking like, yeah, my great grandchildren are going to see this part of the world, and they're going to know that great grandpa Kirk was part of that deal. And
that's right. Amen. That's great. That's a great story, Kirk. I'll tell you a fish story. I was fishing up there. I had to leave. I was fishing out of on the Kvichak River, out of Alaska Sportsman's Lodge, and they've been a huge proponent. All those lodges up there were tremendous advocates for that river. Brian Kraft, who owns Alaska Sportsman's Lodge in particular, was one of the leaders. Anyway, I could only fish for half a day because I had to get back. I was actually going to, I think I had to get back to New York to meet with our friends at Tiffany and Company, who were helping to both oppose Pebble Mine, but also to support our efforts to clean up abandoned mines. And so I went out to fish in front of the lodge for maybe an hour. And as I mentioned, you swing these flesh flies. And so you kind of do a 3/4 cast, and you let it swing all the way down, and then, you lift back up to cast. And I was lifting back up to cast, and I felt this tug perfectly downstream of me. And then on a 45-degree angle to the side, I saw a fish come out of the water. And while I'm fighting this fish over here, I said to my guide, "Did you see that fish jump over there?" And he said, "Yeah, that's your fish."
Yeah, that's right.
That's how strong and fast they are. I mean, they are like rockets.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, let's jump coasts and let's talk about Atlantic salmon, or let's talk about something in the east, if you can spell out a win that TU has had somewhere on the eastern seaboard.
Yeah, I mean, conservation it's really a game of increments. The old expression, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. That's what much of conservation is about. It's a long game. You got to be in it to win it. You got to be in it for the long run. And you don't have a lot of big major victories that happen all at once. And so I don't want to overlook the fact that there are dozens of river restoration projects that are happening all along the eastern seaboard that TU staff and chapters have been involved in. But one project that's really noteworthy was the removal of 2 dams on the Penobscot River and bypassing a third. And scientists tell us that the Penobscot in Maine, freeing that river up really is the last best chance for Atlantic salmon here in the U.S. And we were part of a giant coalition of different interests that managed to buy those 2 dams, create a bypass around the third. And the fish response has been just unbelievable. We're seeing increases in alewives in the tens of thousands. We're getting shad in communities that haven't had shad in decades. We've got the striper run has tremendously rebounded, and the Atlantic salmon run has rebounded, but not as much as we'd like, and we hope it's going to continue to rebound. But the thing about fish is they're incredibly resilient creatures. If you put the bends back in a river and you recover its natural, what they call sinuosity, so fish have a place to hold and to hide in response to floods. If you replant those streamside areas with trees, if you take out those dams that obstruct them from moving, their response is incredible. It's almost immediate. We do work, Kirk, in a place called the Driftless area, which I know you know well. It's the unglaciated part of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. And so when the last glaciers receded, they just kind of bypassed this area. So it almost has like a Vermont feel to it, or a little bit of almost like a West Virginia feel. We go in there and we shock those streams, and it's been, that area has been degraded by agricultural development. And so you see a tremendous amount of erosion, you know, a lot of down cutting of the stream banks. And we go in there and we'll shock these streams. And that's something that fish biologists do to just get a sense of what the population of fish is. It's not lethal. They come back, but it gives the biologists a chance to, you know, count the fish. We find 200 to 300 fish per mile pre-restoration. It's a good number. When post-restoration, a year after we do the kind of restoration work we were just talking about, the numbers are 2,000 to 3,000 fish per mile. You know, these are just incredibly resilient creatures, and if we give them half a chance, they will respond to our efforts.
There is nothing that I like more than going to the driftless and throwing a grasshopper fly in some of those little creeks and end the day with a nice spotted cow beer.
Yeah.
You can only get it in Wisconsin, and I always make a point when I'm there. We got a few minutes left. I want to shift towards the future, my friend, and let's talk about what our challenges are, you know, to you as an organization, but also all anglers, all people who enjoy rivers, lakes. You know, we got to be concerned about climate change. Can you talk to me about climate change? And then maybe can you talk to me about the clean water rule? You know, and I know that we've got an opportunity. You were just talking about removing dams. The Snake River dams, if we take those out, we can restore one of the greatest fisheries on the planet.
Yeah.
And so those three things would be what I'd most be interested in hearing about from you.
Okay. Well, you want me to talk about, okay, so let me see. It's climate change. What was the other one?
Clean
water and the Snake River dams. How much time do I have?
You got about 5 minutes.
So, I mean, climate change is, by now everyone's aware of it. And, you know, we still have in this country people who, you know, don't believe it's happening or don't believe it's caused by humans. And my response to that is, if you care about making fishing better, you should support protecting, reconnecting, and restoring river systems. If you care about that because it makes fishing better, great. You should be supporting our work. If you care about it because it happens to be the best and most effective climate change adaptation strategy, the best and most effective way to recover the natural resilience of our river systems to respond to flood and fire and drought, will then support to you for that reason. But we've got to get out of this game of, you know, making some of these issues that are happening on the planet political issues. It's completely nonsensical, and all we're doing is we're sullying our own nest. And I think that bleeds nicely into the clean water rules. For the first, you know, couple decades of the Clean Water Act, it always applied to small seasonal streams. These are small streams that respond form because of weather events like rain. And, you know, every angler knows that gravity works cheap and it never takes a day off. So when those little creeks, those little rills and runs and rivulets, they get filled full of water, they then flow down into the next lower water body and they get a little bigger, and then they go down to the larger water body until eventually those little dry streams in West Virginia, they flow. The result of their water flows right outside my window here down the Potomac River, which is the drinking water for the District of Columbia. And there was unfortunately, there was a court case that called into question whether or not small streams should be protected under the Clean Water Act. And without getting into all the background, the Obama administration spent 6 years working on this, basically demonstrating what the court had asked for. The court asked for a significant nexus, to document a significant nexus between upstream water bodies and downstream rivers, navigable rivers. That was then litigated, and the Trump administration, when they came into office, they threw out the Obama rules and they put a new rule in place that leaves unprotected all of those small seasonal streams. And so one of the things that we're really working on now is helping to convince the Biden administration that there's a way to depoliticize clean water, right? There's a way to do this in a way that provides the certainty that the agricultural community needs, that provides the clarity that real estate developers need, and still protect the sources of our coldest and cleanest water. And so that's a huge priority for us as an organization.
Awesome. Now, lastly, I think that we're looking for another big cause industry-wise, the fishing community, so forth. Look, removal of the lower Snake River dams can restore that fishery, can it?
I'll tell you what, the science is absolutely clear. There is no way to bring back Idaho's fabled Pacific salmon without removing the 4 lower Snake River dams. Think about this for a second, Kirk. Before those dams were built in the 50s, Idaho had a several-month-long fishing season where you could take several months. You could take 2 fish per day. 2 fish per day. Today, in places like the Middle Fork of the Salmon River, which is a 5-star hotel for fish, the habitat is absolutely pristine. They get 1% of the historic numbers of Chinook salmon back there that they used to get. A place like the South Fork of the Salmon River drainage used to 40% of all the steelhead in the entire Columbia Basin used to go back up into there to spawn. And because of those dams, those fish are not able to get back to their spawning grounds, and their progeny aren't able to get back through the slack water bathtubs that have been created by those dams, where they get preyed on by all kinds of predators. And so this is a major issue for Trout Unlimited, helping to remove those 4 lower Snake River dams. But Kirk, we want to do this the right way. I think too many people in the business of conservation forget that the business of conservation is about people. And so we want to do this in a way that helps to make sure that the people who have become dependent on those dams, the barge operators, the farmers, the irrigators, that they are taken care of, that they do not get left behind, that everybody is going to win when we take out those dams. The people of Idaho are going to win. Tribes that have been, basically they've lost their historic hunting grounds. They've lost their fishing grounds. They've had their treaty rights violated for years and years, and they've seen these salmon, which are so culturally important to them, dwindle now to the fact that we probably only have 10 years, 20 years before these fish are gone. We have a chance to bring them back. Well,
we're going to do it, my friend. We're going to do it. Good news is we never wake up in the morning wondering what we're going to do, is it? It's like, I'm never bored. It was always something to work on. Thank you for being here on Round the Fire on EarthX TV. It's been informative. If people want more information about TU, they should just go to our website, www.tu.org. And thanks, Chris, for everything.
Thanks, Kirk. Great to be with you.
Yeah, we'll see you out there.
All right.
We are sportsmen, and we are in trouble. We've learned what happens when we underestimate a serious threat. We can't make that same mistake with climate change. We need to stand up for America and for our kids and grandkids. Tell Congress to act on climate.